Hello people of YouTube, my name is Brad, this is my channel Animate Orange, and welcome to the review video for the Sith Tie Fighter model from Metal Earth. This is the latest Tie Fighter model from Metal Earth right here. This is one of a series of models that was fairly recently released in line with the new Star Wars movie Rise of Skywalker. Of course, they had to redesign and put out a new TIE Fighter, and we have it right here. Just finished building that, along with the other releases that came out for the new movie. We've got Zori's Y-Wing, which I've built. I've got a build and review video for that. Rather complicated build. We've got the Resistance A-Wing Fighter. Got that one in my list of things to build. The First Order Transspeeder. Haven't gotten to that one yet. And D-O, little robot, little droid. I have built that. Also have a build and review video. But today we're going to talk about this model right here, and in line with the Y-Wing that I've already done. This is a much more detailed and complicated model than what Metal Earth has been doing. And for the most part, that is amazing. This has so much amazing detail in it, so many parts. This is not the old school TIE Fighter. I mean, they obviously redesigned it for the new movie, but there's so much more detail to be had, and they've absolutely included that detail in this build. There's so much to this. And I mentioned in one of the build videos, I think the first build video, they don't have a difficulty rating on the back of the packaging anymore, but they do still have a difficulty rating. If you go online, this is listed as a difficult or challenging rating. I believe it's technically challenging. And I would almost argue with that. This is more of a expert level, or at least borderline expert, because there's so much to it. I would not recommend this or the Y-Wing, honestly, as a beginner's or early model. If you're just getting into Metal Earth models, I wouldn't start with this model unless you're just extremely confident you know how to work with this metal and get through with it, because there's really some things that if had this been the first model that I had built, I don't know that I would have even gotten halfway through it. I don't even know if I'd gotten a quarter way through it. I would have thought I've lost my mind and I should put this down. That is not to say that it isn't doable, just to say that before you do this model, my recommendation would be to get some experience building a few other models first, because this is it absolutely earns at least the status of being challenging, because there's just a lot of tricky things you need to be able to do to get this thing together. Not super tricky. I've certainly done things that were even more insane than this, but there is a little bit of detail, and it really helps to have some good precision tools to put this thing together, because you've got some very small parts in this. Almost to the point of, not even almost, it's kind of to the point of pushing the limits of what I believe I can actually do. Things got any more complicated or any smaller, I don't know that I could feel any confidence in being able to pull this off. Some of the stuff with this, I'm actually not sure how I pulled it off, but it looks pretty cool. I've even seen at least one person on social media kind of question, was it really necessary for it to have this much detail? Is it worth it? And I'm not saying that I agree or disagree with that. It is a fantastic challenge, and it is a lot of detail, and it is certainly very different from the TIE Fighter that I kind of grew up with. They've made so many changes, not just to these solar, not wings, but panels, because they're two on each side. They're like layered and extra detail. It's not a simple thing anymore, but even the complexity within these sort of arm pieces, there's so much stuff in there. I made the comment that the last TIE Fighter I built, which was a TIE Striker, I think it was, took me just under 2 hours to build. I don't have a specific time for the original TIE Fighter or Darth Vader's. I built them so long ago that I didn't keep records of how long it took me to build it, and I no longer have the video for all of that to go back and look, but I'm guessing somewhere around 2 to 3 hours to build those two models, if even that. This took 6.5 hours to put together, and that definitely took my time. I needed to take my time because there's so much to it. You end up though with this awesome, amazing, detailed results. If you take your time and build it carefully, and take breaks, don't get frustrated with it, take breaks, you're going to end up with a fantastic display model. Speaking of getting frustrated though, I can't say that I got frustrated with this model. I can't say there were any points where I'm just like, did that whole, what am I going to do? How am I going to pull this off? What are they even asking me to do here? Because there are some times where I look at something and it just doesn't even make sense what I'm expected to do to build a model. I'll eventually come around and figure it out. There were a few times where I was a little puzzled, and looking back I'm not sure how I pulled it off, but in the end nothing just really had me jumping up and down going, this is crazy. Another big difference, kind of an evolution that I've seen with the TIE Fighters, because at this point we have several. We've got the original and the Darth Vader's TIE Fighter, and then you have the Special Forces, the TIE Fighter that came out with the first of the newest trilogy movies, and then you had the TIE Striker, which I think actually came out along with Rogue One, and then now we have this TIE Fighter. So I think, if I'm counting correctly, that's 5 different versions of the TIE Fighter so far. And the original 2, the Darth Vader's and just the original TIE Fighter, this center cockpit was all one piece, and there's anybody that's tried that model knows the frustration of trying to fold all those pieces around in a circle and then get the pieces, not just the guns, but getting these arm pieces attached to it was a nightmare. And one of the first things I learned was to not close that ball up and attach those pieces and then close it up. Still very challenging, very frustrating start to that build, and a lot of people, including myself, failed on the first try. My first try at Darth Vader's TIE Fighter was a complete failure, and I almost didn't make these videos, but I came back. Anyway, that's another story. They've made changes over time with, for instance, with the Special Forces TIE Fighter. They actually split the cockpit ball area into 2 pieces that you shaped and brought together, and that was a huge help. I did have some issues getting one of the top pieces on after that, and that was frustrating, but I really liked that they split that cockpit ball into 2 pieces and made it a lot easier to get those arms on more securely and without breaking anything. Now the TIE Striker still had that kind of roundish front part, but the rest of the body was longer, and so it was a very different animal, just kind of doing sort of a dome shape on the front. And Kylo Ren's silencer wasn't even really a rounded spherical type body at all. It was very angular and just also a very completely different build, so it almost doesn't fall within the same category. With this, they changed things again. It does very much have that traditional ball center cockpit. The arms on the side seem to be bigger, but what they've done this time, they've actually taken it and broken it into sections. So you have sections that attach directly to each arm piece. You have a top section, you have a bottom section, so it very much changes the way it comes together, and there's no issue of trying to reach into a completed thing to twist tabs. You build everything and then you bring it together. It actually works fairly well, I think. I think most people that I've seen agreed with that. It's still a little bit fiddly, but overall I think it's a much better way of doing it and ends up producing a good result. But like I said, there's a lot of tiny detail. Probably the smallest circle I've built so far in making these models are these little gun things. And that's another example of how much farther we've come with the detail in this compared to the original 2 different TIE Fighters, the advanced TIE Fighter, Darth Vader's fighter, and the original TIE. The guns on those are basically a strip of metal. You fold this thing in half and you have this strip of metal poking out, and it was in itself kind of difficult to hold and twist the tabs. These guns are tiny little round circles on kind of a triangular or pyramid base that attaches, and it's very tiny and very fiddly to actually shape. It's smaller than my smallest drill bit, so I really didn't have any form to shape the curve all the way around, and had to do my best with tweezers, which once you get that small, it's very challenging. And they're not a perfect circle, not even close. I did my best, and overall, the grand scheme of things, they don't really stand out, because you know you have the red piece that folds in front and for the most part covers it up and makes it look mostly circular. But that level of detail, it's more challenging to get done, but it's so much more detail. These arm pieces are so much more involved, and I'm sure there's just a lot more designed into them in the new movie, but they definitely take advantage of that. And I ended up taking the build video and divided it into 3 different videos, and the first video is all about just making those arm pieces. That's how much more detail is in this model compared to the first 2 or 3. Solar panel or whatever panels these are on the side have so much more detail. They're more compound, they hook together. You've got this trailing piece with some detail in it, so much more to it. The engine is kind of a double piece, and it doesn't want to quite sit straight, but there's actually, it's kind of a, looks like double thrusters or double ion engine thing going on back there, and I counted, it's actually 5 pieces on that one little engine assembly. 5 different pieces to bring that together, because it's kind of layered, and it's a lot more to it. It's a lot more effort. It's going to take you a lot more time, but you're going to end up with a lot more detailed and amazing looking build to impress your friends. Is it worth it? That's kind of for you to decide. It took me 6.5 hours. I've got a fair amount of experience building these models, as this was like 250 something of unique builds. I don't know how long it's going to take you. I don't know if it's going to be worth it for you, but I'm going to try and tell you about it right here as much as I can now without making too long a video, and let you decide for yourself. I think it was worth it at least once to build this model, go through the experience, and have this fantastic looking model. I don't know if I'd do it again, and not because I hated it, but just because it was a pretty detailed build, and right now one is enough. Who knows, that may change. But let's get into more about the review. Now, always a big issue with building these models is the instructions. How good are the instructions? Honestly, the instructions for this model were pretty well done. I don't remember running into any issues that threw me for a loop. I, of course, made a few mistakes of my own, just misinterpreting things, but that's just me. I make mistakes. I get excited. I overlook things. I'm human. But as far as the instructions are concerned, they were pretty straightforward and pretty easy to understand. There were a couple of times where I had to hold the instructions under a magnifying glass to make sure I clearly saw how the blue arrows were telling me to shape and fold things and how things fit together. I've mentioned that before, I think, with the Y-wing, and I think it actually discouraged somebody if the instructions are so tiny, I guess, that you need a magnifying glass. No, that's just me. That's just me, because I don't have the best eyesight. I use a magnifying glass when I build these videos. We don't talk about it in every video, but I have a desk lighted magnifying glass that helps me out because my vision is a little bit limited, and that's part of the challenge for me with these models. But just to make sure I was getting things right, there were a couple of times I held those instructions under the magnifying glass to make it bigger, to make sure I understood how things were going together. I referenced the 360 view at least one time to understand how things were going together, but never really because the instructions were just throwing me for a loop. If anything, one thing about the instructions that I would change, it's not even really a complaint, but there was one situation that in the first, like, I want to say 3.5 pages, the instructions are fantastic. Absolutely, the first 3.5 pages. You build this part ×2, part of the arm assembly, and it labels it as part A, or assembly A, and then you go down, you add assembly A in with some other stuff, and you assemble assembly like B, I think it is, and then you go down and you assemble something similar to the first thing that you first assembly, and that's assembly C. And they do that, and they label this assembly A, this B, this C, this D. I think it goes all the way up to F, and that's mainly for these arm pieces and constructing the arm pieces. Then you get to the point where you're starting to do the top and bottom sections of the cockpit, and they stop doing that lettered labeling of the assemblies. The one thing I would change is I would continue with that, label this top section and bottom section another letter, and do the callback when it comes time to put those together like they did with the arm pieces. It wasn't difficult to figure it out that they didn't label it, and the top and bottom are fairly similar pieces. The distinguishing characteristic for me was the little red guns, which I saw those in the instructions, was able to determine which one was top and which one was bottom, and orientation it went for the most part. But it would have been, and I think the top part, the orientation, there's this little funny doodad kind of wiggly, squiggly shaped thing that helped me orient it. Unfortunately, the instructions, as far as I can tell, were correct, but having that keeping that system going with a couple of extra letters would have been nice, but not a complaint, really. It's just an added thing that would have kept that consistency and made it nicer. I'm nitpicking here. The instructions were absolutely good. The only other thing, again nitpicking, is when you're building these side panels, there was a part where you build one of the outer border parts, I think is a smaller wing, and then you go on to do something else rather than just adding that border to the wing right there. You do something else, then you come back and pick up this panel which you've done put down and add the border, and then add that to something else. And it's like, I would have done that in a slightly different order. Again, that's nitpicking. In the end, matters not at all. Fantastic model. Nothing tripped me up. The instructions for this one are really good, in my opinion. There's a few things to look out for when you're putting this together. Just a couple of suggestions. There's really not a lot to dig in here. I mean, there is a lot of model to talk about, but not a lot of problems to dig into. No huge tips. When you're building the first few pages, you're building these arm pieces. You build like this triangular piece here, and then you're adding some pieces on the side. My recommendation when you're adding those side pieces, I think the first couple are 14 and 15. Angle the tab down a little bit, because that piece is sitting on an angled side. That angled tab is going to help you twist, access and twist the tabs from the inside. It's going to help that part sit down at an angle like it should be, rather than flaring up, so that after you've added the pieces on that kind of triangular piece, it later adds all of those assemblies sit on top of another piece. You're going to have a slightly easier time lining up all those tabs if that part's not flared out, if it's actually sitting down, and angling those tabs before you attach those side pieces is going to help. And then you get 4 different ones that you're assembling, and as you're adding the smaller triangle piece to the larger part of these arms, tops and bottoms, you build the top, you build the bottom on one side, you build the top and then the bottom on the other side. There's a piece that's called in that's kind of attaches with one tab to the other assembly, and then that whole thing later attaches to a bigger piece, and there's another tab on this side piece. It's part 7, 17, 21, and 24. There are 4 of them, and they're kind of flared out, a little curved piece in the back. You're only attaching it to the side with one tab. Twist it, but don't twist it too tightly. Leave it so that it can screw out, because if it does fall out, which like 3 of the 4 mine did, it's really easy after you've got the triangular piece attached to the top to just screw it back in, put that other tab into its place, and twist it. I wouldn't even worry too much about it falling off. Just twist the tab ahead of time so that it screws in and out, so that when you come to that part, you don't have to go in and twist it. That twisted tab is going to be enough to hold it once you secure the other tab. It's what I ended up doing, and it worked well for me. Again, a minor thing. If you got some experience building these models, you'll probably figure that one out for yourself, but wanted to give that little tip. Along with the obvious, just take it one tab at a time. It was intimidating trying to add this triangular piece with the side part, 3 or 4 side parts, all in one time with all the different tabs that are wiggling around. But I just started at one side, worked my way across, and got everything in fairly easily. Deep breath, take your time, one tab at a time, and this thing will come together just fine. When you get to the top of page 5 and you're building this little engine piece right here, it does kind of say in the instructions, when you're attaching the assembly inside of part 45, it does show starting to kind of wrap the side pieces around, but leaving it open so you can attach that assembly inside. I didn't finish it, but curved the bottom around a little bit too much and made it difficult on myself. But the other thing that I didn't anticipate is you want to make sure, and leave yourself plenty of room, is you want to make sure that the little engine doodads go into the space. They're a tight fit, and I was going at too much of an angle, and I really struggled with getting that to pop inside of the little areas, top and bottoms, kind of sort of circular-ish areas. It didn't want to pop into place because one slides into the other, and make sure that you can get that in there before you close things up, or before you close things up too much. Leave yourself plenty of room. The instructions kind of indicate that, and me thinking I know better, didn't leave myself enough room and really struggled with that. So be sure before you close things up much, just kind of maybe angle that side piece down and start the bottom curve and top curve halfway. Leave yourself plenty of room to get that in there and get the pieces in and situated before you shape the rest of it. Of course, pay attention to little bits of detail. As I've already mentioned, the top and bottom of the center cockpit, make sure you look for the details so that you don't get those mixed up and you put them on in the right way. Like I said, the guns on the bottom and the little squiggly part on the top is what helped me orient them correctly, because there wasn't a lot of other hints with that. The other thing is the side pieces to the cockpit that go inside of the arms. I initially started to put one on backwards. Make sure you understand that while they look fairly symmetrical and it's the same part for both sides, there is like a kind of a dark spot on one end. You'll notice there's 2 slots front and back. 2 sets, a set of slots front and back. And what I didn't pick up at first was that one of those, the slots are close together on the same section, because there's 3 sections that fold in, and one end the tabs, the 2 slots are on the same section. On the other end the slots are spread out and on separate sections, top and bottom, where the middle has no slot. And the mistake that I made was understanding which went where. The closer slots on the middle tab go towards the front here, and the wider slots that are on separate sections go in the back where these kind of thinned out little thin pieces are. And I originally tried to put that backwards. Don't make a mistake that I did. Make sure that you understand which wind goes where, and that it is not a completely symmetrical piece, and it does have an orientation that is proper and orientation that is not. Beyond that, just to let you know, when it comes time to doing these panel pieces, almost all of the tabs in these panel pieces are folded over. It would help tremendously if you had some sort of flat, fine-tipped tool to help fold over all of those tabs, and you're going to end up in multiple situations where it's 2 or more tabs close together folding in on each other. So there is a little bit of a process to that. You have to fold one down before the other, and then there was even at least one spot on each side where it's 4 tabs all folding in together. You can't fold them out. It's not going to work that way. You have to fold them in. So you're going to want to take a deep breath and be patient. I have this flat set of tweezers, or actually it's a pointed set of precision tweezers, and I've actually ground the tip down just a little bit to the tip is about the width of the standard Metal Earth tab, and it's a nice flat point if you pinch it together to push over those tabs. So this tool worked great for me. I would recommend getting something like that, something that has a little flat end on it to help push those tabs over to make it easier to do the side panels. Just drop my tool to do the side panels of the Sith Tie Fighter. You really are going to run into a lot of folded over tabs. You have to. There's not any room in there for twisted tabs and so many things going on top of each other. But still, again, challenging but very doable, and you end up with this fantastic build. And I've tried to cram a lot into a short-ish video. There is a lot to this build, and as usual, I have done a full-out build video, actually 3 build videos, because it's so long to break it up. So if you're wanting more detail, definitely check those videos out. Video 1 is all about doing these arm pieces. Video 2 is about bringing those together and building the center cockpit pieces. Video 3 is all about doing these outer panels, solar panels I think they're called, and the base. So if you're looking for a specific section or you have a problem in a specific area, that's the layout of the 3 different videos. There's lots more detail on how I did all the different things. You can see what I did. Really, biggest thing is don't do this unless, my suggestion is to not do this unless you have some experience doing some different things with Metal Earth. There's a lot of curving things curving things by hand with your own fingers. There's a lot of folding tabs carefully on top of each other. There's a lot of really tight corners, a lot of angled pieces, attaching to angled pieces, where putting a piece with right angles on top of a flat piece is one thing, but when you have a piece that's curved or angled, trying to attach to the piece that's got angles on either side, there's a different geometry to it, and it takes a little bit of experience to know when to hook the tabs and when to bend those things too far or not enough to get things in there. And I could go on forever about every one of them, and to some degree I have in the build video, but just know that for this Sith Tie Fighter, and even for the Y-Wing of the newer models, they're more complicated, and it really helps to have some more experience and definitely some patience to be able to pull off the builds. Also, the stand. The newer models have stands that aren't directly attached to the models themselves, so you can take them out of their stands. The one for this one is a bit interesting. Kind of have mixed feelings about it. It's the same style that you see with the other models, and with this one what they've done is you fold out these 2 side pieces and then you curve the front up or back up, and you kind of bend the front up, and it kind of cradles the model in there. I've done it just about as good as I can, but you have to actually kind of angle the model in, and it grabs a hold to it, and that's great. Honestly, it's nice. You can take the model out if you want to. I wouldn't take it in and out any more than you need to, because over time you might bump and bend these little flaps that are holding it down, and they're going to weaken. So it's nice that it's a cradling type setup that's going to hold this thing in. You can take the model out, but there's so much potential here for that wearing out if you pick it up and put it down too much. Kind of a mixed thing. Again, I think I mentioned this with another model, I can't remember which one. It'd almost be nice if there was a piece that attaches to the side that helps strengthen it, though the fiddly tabs would be annoying. It's a mixed bag which way you want to go. But there it is, there's the stand. You can also be creative and do your own thing, but it does hold on to it fairly well, at least for now. Then there's the final question that I like to ask at the end of every build. Sometimes I forget, but the question is, if I had this to do over again, what would I do differently? Basically, are there any big lessons learned? And honestly, with this one, it went smoothly. The only thing is kind of a typical with every build is there are just some things that, like the little round circular parts I mentioned and talked about how tiny the guns were, but there's also a very tiny circular part on the very back of these two arms. And I kind of forgot to mention, I kind of like to have another try at doing that. Maybe I could do better, maybe not. Just making sure to pay attention where I mixed up the two side pieces of the cabin and got those backwards. Just paying a little bit more attention so that I don't waste a few minutes having to undo something I already did. But overall, no, I think this one went really well. This model, as long as it was, as much time as it took to put into it, it went really well and really smoothly. So there's really not any big thing that I can say if I had it to do over again, what would I do differently? Just pay more attention. I'm going to leave it at that. I do want to thank Metal Earth for sending me this model to build and review. Metal Earth was kind enough to send me 3 different Star Wars models for me to build. This is the last of the 3. I do have every intention of getting the other 2. I've actually already got one of the other 2 and building them in time. Got a lot of things in line right now, but thank you to Metal Earth for sending me this model. Thank you for watching. Build videos are already out there. If you have any questions or comments, as always, leave them down below. Thank you to my Patreon supporters as well for continuing to support this channel. I appreciate that very much. It helps me to keep a line of models for me to build and helps keep things behind the scenes such as software and lighting and replacement parts when things break. It helps keep that stuff funded. So thank you very much. Thank you for watching, and as always, I gotta do it. Keep on keeping on.